It's good to have you on the panel. As His Excellency Suhail Al-Mazrui noted here, you're a big importer of oil, but you're actually pushing ahead with your own natural gas development. We saw Prime Minister Modi make the announcement to net zero by 2070. At the same time, although that's a long time frame, he said by 2030, half of the primary energy will be from renewables. So it's a kind of a double punch there of optimism, and one, it's a longer timeline. You've asked now to not phase out coal, but to phase down. And I'm one of the few that went to Sringali, and I've been to your coal pits. It's a primary energy source for India. Can you do it in a clean way and adhere to this timeline to 2070, and then accelerate the transition here that we see underway? Again, I saw it firsthand, what you're doing in solar and other resources now in India. Please.
In many respects, India's case is somewhat sui generis. Our per capita consumption of energy compared to global averages is about 1/3. We are in the process of transiting from being a $2.89 trillion economy with very low per capita consumption to a $5 trillion economy in 2025, with energy consumption per capita rising very swiftly. And we are in the situation where, in spite of our need and reliance on traditional energy for the foreseeable future, we are making major commitments, as was evidenced by the fact that the Prime Minister at Glasgow made 5 major announcements, 2 or 3 of which you have just alluded to. Net zero by 2070, 50% of our energy requirements by 2030 coming from, renewables, and 450 gigawatts going up to 500 gigawatts. Now, these are bold by any standards, but if you look at the overall picture, we are not allowing our own requirements of energy and our reliance and heavy dependence. Our dependence on imports for liquid hydrocarbons is 85%. Our energy imports of gas is about 55%. Now, we are doing a large number of things domestically, moving gas from 6% to 15%, moving ethanol blending, which used to be less than 1% in 2014 when the Prime Minister took office, to about, it's already 8.5%. We're taking it up to 20% in 2025. So those domestic actions we will take, but we are simultaneously not only committed to, but at the forefront of the commitments in terms of the transition. I was very impressed by the ministers who talked about transition. Transition, by definition, means that you have to move from a point A to a point B, but you have to manage the transition. Now, for countries like India, which have this kind of dependence on global availability, clearly, if the transition results in costs being imposed on the consumer, which you can use any word you like, unrealistic, unaffordable, etc., the transition becomes just that much more difficult to manage. Now, we are quite, we understand that individual countries and groups of countries will take decisions as they deem appropriate, as it appears to them. But at the same time, I think the transition will need to take into account also the precise requirements, some of them have been mentioned here by my distinguished colleague, on how it affects the larger consuming countries. My own view is that in the coming years, India will be one of the major drivers of demand by virtue of its population, the size of its economy, and the current low per capita levels of consumption. You mentioned something about, I think you were alluding to the phase down as against the phase out. I read about it. I was not at Glasgow. I've seen some reports on who where the inspiration for that language came by. But I think I can personally understand whoever produced that language. I don't think it was us. But I can tell you that one of these statements that I've heard this morning is that this transition will have to be managed in a pragmatic way. And as long as we are all committed to the ultimate objectives, and India's commitment of net zero by 2070, for me as a student of energy transition, I'm new to the oil and natural gas field, I've come in from a completely different profession. I think it's a very bold, ambitious commitment, and also the ones that we plan to carry out by 2030, we will deliver. We are one of the few countries in the world which is delivering on the Paris commitments, and almost in their entirety. So I'm quite happy. In many respects, it's good that Glasgow and an important meeting like this take place back to back, because then our focus can be both on what the reality on the ground is and the need to manage the transition.
Great. Thank you very much for that.